Hi, sorry it took so long for this, but so many things happened and I felt sick. And then I decided it was going to either be the Asian Cup finals or
It's gonna be May. It's gonna be May. It's gonna be May. It's gonna be May.
welcome back to part 3. And if you're new to the series, welcome, where we're basically looking at the World Cup, the 2022 Qatar World Cup, and migrant workers issues during the World Cup. This particular part, which is the final part, looks at how the government and FIFA responded to the allegations. So as you'll see going within the video, Qatar made several reforms to its labor system, including in terms of laws and policy and health and safety conditions at work and so on. So I'd just like to remind you that it is within this context that the allegations continued. So let's get to it.
Now, first off, let's look at wage payments, or rather the lack of it, and how it was addressed. So ongoing claims for due wages and end-of-service benefits continue to be the primary cause for complaints lodged at the Ministry of Labour of Qatar. Some workers were able to change their employment and therefore have an income while they're waiting for their cases to be resolved. But those that are unable to find work, and in some cases unable to leave Qatar without their due wages and benefits. And this was from an ILO progress report on Qatar in 2023.
And the second group is in a dangerous position, because do they wait until their visa gets over and then just leave without receiving anything in hand, which they truly deserve? Or do they wait till after the visa period, as long as the case is ongoing, which is illegal, and remain in an illegal status? I'll come back to the second group in a bit, but let's just continue. Anyways, to deal with the problem of non-payment of wages, or rather wage theft, more than 1 billion riyals were disbursed through a government fund set up specifically for workers' unpaid wages, and also to pay out companies that were struggling to pay their workers, like tier 2 contractors and things like that.
Was that of recruitment fees. Now, recruitment fees are what they sound like, fees paid to secure a job. There are different elements to recruitment fee for a migrant worker especially, and countries have different standards of tolerance to deciding which elements are legal for recruiting agencies or employers to charge workers for. For example, like a medical examination for the work visa is legal, but charging the worker for the visa processing fee might be illegal in some countries, depending again on the system they have.
So I'll do a much more detailed video about recruitment fees and why it's a problem, because it's a very complicated and nuanced topic. But at least in Qatar, collecting recruitment fees is illegal. And so in part 1, I touched upon that government response of instituting that voluntary scheme for companies to partially repay these workers, which is what I just spoke about, and how the country shut down 45 different recruiting agencies for not following the law. So just to add to that, in 2023, labor inspectors started carrying out a targeted inspection of factories, of delivery companies, and construction work sites, and all of these. And this led to 504 work sites, almost all of them in construction, being shut down for non-compliance. 504.
Let's talk about the group of workers who are unable to find work after they leave their first employer, right? Qatar made several welcome changes to its labor laws since 2017, and one of the major reforms was to do away with the requirement for workers to get a no objection certificate from the employer that they're leaving. So now workers could, in theory, freely move through jobs. However, civil society members alleged that in practice, many workers still require it as an unsaid rule, and in some cases, the requirement of this no objection certificate is still stated in job advertisements. The organizations also alleged that government data showed workers' applications to transfer jobs were rejected in 2023. And these included workers that paid recruitment fees, faced abusive conditions, and were misled about their jobs by employers. So what happens to them? And of course, this is just one of the many issues, but Amnesty in November also alleged that progress regarding workers' rights had stalled after the World Cup had ended. Reforms were, of course, belatedly introduced and weakly enforced by the Qatari government, and that FIFA's introduction of their own human rights policy in 2017, I'll get to that, failed to prevent widespread abuses occurring in the lead up to and during the tournament, and these abuses continue today.
If you want to know more about these allegations, head over to parts 1 and 2. They're pretty good, just saying.
Now, naturally, Qatar's International Media Office strongly rejected these allegations that improving workers' rights had anything to do with the World Cup. They assured that the country strengthened its labor system since the end of the tournament and that all existing reforms continue to be fully implemented.
And well, they're not wrong. Qatar was actually the first in the Middle East region to institute a non-discriminatory minimum wage, which means that all nationals, Qatari nationals as well as foreigners, earn the same minimum wage. 97% of all salaries were protected through Qatar's wage protection system, which again we can speak about in another video. There was a removal of barriers to change jobs, which I mentioned, the NOC, the no objection certificate, and the issues that caused as well. But it also introduced a simplified complaints mechanism. There was an easier access to justice, crackdown on illegal recruitment fees, and other health and safety measures, regular health screenings to identify underlying conditions, etc. But that doesn't mean that these allegations are false and that these allegations don't exist. These are just some of the reforms that Qatar has made across the years, starting sometime around the time after they bid for the World Cup. Okay, so what about FIFA? They're an international organization. Surely, they have great, if not better, labor and human rights standards, right? Right?
Very false. Very false.
True.
No, very false.
Well, in 2016, FIFA adopted the United Nations Guiding Principles on Business and Human Rights and revised its own statutes to include this responsibility to respect human rights. Now, the guiding principles are voluntary until you adopt them as company policy, in which case you'll be held to those standards, definitely. FIFA also created and staffed a human rights director, created the roles of child protection and safeguarding manager. It even set up a whistleblower system to directly report abuse to FIFA officials.
Don't criticize Qatar, don't criticize the players, don't criticize anyone. Criticize FIFA, criticize me if you want, because I'm responsible for everything.
Thanks, Gianni. Let's start.
Now, among the many reforms that FIFA made, it even established an independent human rights advisory board to provide service or to provide advice and report on FIFA's implementation of its human rights commitments. FIFA did not renew the mandate for that advisory board in 2021, a year before the World Cup. Now, another thing, in the FIFA Congress in March, the organization reported launching a review into the remedy provided to workers who suffered abuse linked to the Qatar World Cup in 2022. Now, may I add that FIFA earned around $7.5 billion in the 4 years leading up to the tournament. FIFA even had a document on the reformed bidding process for tournaments in the future, where it explicitly states that countries that win the bid need to respect international human rights and labor standards. Nonetheless, it's never revealed the details of this particular human rights review. Now, the FIFA human rights policy that they adopted in 2017, I mentioned it earlier, stating that human rights commitments are binding on all FIFA bodies and officials, right? So, however, if you go back to part 1 and 2, you'll see how recent these allegations are. In fact, in 2022, FIFA pledged to set up a human rights committee specifically for the 2022 Qatar World Cup, but there's been no update on the status or its learnings or anything of that sort.
Now, the problem here is not just a lack of transparency. As those of us in the global south might be familiar, corporates and governments rarely answer to issues of controversy and public uproar. But particularly for this issue, there's just a lot of noise and no answers, especially from FIFA. And the AFC is being held in the same stadiums that were built upon migrant lives. And that's the tea. Thanks for being here. This is the end of the series. I hope you guys enjoyed it as much as I enjoyed making it. I will get back to you soon with shorter videos, but maybe explaining conceptual terms better, right? So let's get to that in a bit. But thank you for being here so far.